Good morning. Welcome to the homestead. We are starting a couple of big projects in the coming days. One is our septic system. We're going to rent an excavator and have our initial site speculative survey performed tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. And while we have the excavator here, we're going to try to do a little digging for what we are dubbing the geothermal hoop house. We're building a hoop house. If you don't know, hoop house is just kind of a plastic covered garden made with some kind of hoop, and we're using these large cattle panels to provide some relief from the cold weather and extend your growing season. We're experimenting with a very small one. It's only going to be about 8 feet by I think ends up being 16 feet, not huge. But we're trying something different that we've learned about recently, which is using geothermal properties. What that is trading off heat and cool from the ground into your greenhouse. Some people say that using this properly, you can grow year-round in just about any climate. And the idea is we will run some of this tubing. This is a 3-inch corrugated, perforated plastic tubing underground in a kind of a matrix, back and forth, and then we will run a electric fan that's going to basically pull air through that year-round. And what that will do is that will trade off. On the days that the greenhouse is hot, it will be pushing warm air into the ground and hopefully cooling that air and warming the ground. And on the days when the greenhouse is cold, it will do the exact same thing in reverse by pulling warm air from out of the ground, warmer air out of the ground and into the greenhouse, and pushing cool air down into the ground. The whole idea is to capacitate heat through your seasons. This is supposed to work pretty well. We're starting small. We're putting about 160 feet of the corrugated pipe in the ground, and like I say, the greenhouse is pretty small anyway. The hoop house is going to be pretty small anyway. But the idea is you dig down deep enough to where the ground temperature is stable year-round. Not everybody knows this, but the ground in almost every part of the world is about 50 degrees underground once you get past about 3 or 4 feet. Our goal is to dig a 5-foot hole that's the size of the greenhouse and bury our pipe in that hole and then backfill it and build our greenhouse on top of it. There's no particular reason to build directly on top of it other than to save on piping. I think a lot of people do it for space because they don't have a ton of space. We can move our greenhouse within reason in the future and still use the same underground pipe. I'm not sure if we're going to do that or not. Time will tell. But that's the plan right here between our other few gardens. We're going to unload a bunch of dirt today. The truck is currently full with about a cubic yard of a type of soil mix that we buy. And what we're going to do with that, we're not ready for it yet, but I want to get it out of the truck and nearby. So I've put down some of these log cutoffs. They're just maybe 1/4-inch thick slabs that we use for different things around the property. They're basically waste from our sawmill, but they're really useful. We use them for roofing and for putting up panels around, gardens and things like that. And so we're going to just pile the dirt onto that to get it out of the truck, and then in the coming days fill the garden beds with it. But I want it nearby so I don't have to move it, more than a few times. And in the bottom of our garden beds, the idea is that we're going to put in some other logs and cutoffs and some organic matter for about the bottom half of the planting beds, and we'll show you more of that as we get closer to building the hoop house. These are our cattle panels. They're a heavy gauge welded wire panel. They're 16 feet by 4 feet. We're going to use those for the main structure of our hoop house. They're a little spendy, but the purchase of these panels was made possible by patrons of the channel last month. Thank you so much for getting behind us and helping us with projects like this. And if you're interested in becoming a patron of the channel, please check out patreon.com/deeprootsfamily. Thanks, patrons. air pipes that we're putting underneath the geothermal greenhouse, they're going to just be zigzagged back and forth like this. We have the option of building them in the ground once we've dug, but tomorrow we only have 8 hours on the rental for the digging machine, and I don't want to spend any of that time building this. So the idea is we're going to build it out here and on these wooden this wooden frame, and then hopefully what we'll be able to do is easily drop that into the hole that we dig tomorrow in no time without taking any of the expensive rental equipment time. This is sort of a bad time to notice this, but only half that pipe was perforated. I had to go to several stores to find pipe, and I was frustrated, and by the time I got done I just grabbed some off the shelf and forgot to check if it was perforated. It's corrugated, it looks exactly the same, but there's these little slits that are usually in it. So what we're going to do is take a saw and just perforate the underside of the pipe that doesn't already have holes in it. The reason for the perforations is, which was really strange to me, I didn't really understand this when I first started reading about it, but I was afraid groundwater would get into the pipes. But what actually would happen is when the warm, moist air from your greenhouse goes into the cool earth, it's going to condense. Water's going to build up in those pipes, and we need a way for it to get out. So, perforated pipes. It's actually going to be kind of better because the perforations we're making are only going to be on the bottom of the pipe and not on the top, and that'll just let less soil into the pipes, and there's a little more work to make them, but I think it'll be pretty fast with our saw.
Go. I realized I couldn't really do anything once I got.
So we set the blade really shallow, so that it only cuts through the ribs. It doesn't cut through the low spots, because then the pipe would come into two pieces. When we got this property, we inherited a bunch of trash. There's places all over the property where there's just chunks of old metal and bits of cars and mattresses. I don't know, just junk. It's not widespread. There's kind of several places that they threw it and either let nature bury it or buried it themselves, but we want to eventually mow out here, cut some hay, and this stuff's just going to be in the way. So today we're just going to pull a bunch of it out, throw it in the back of the truck, and go to the dump. What do you think? You see the trash? Here's some. Almost looks like a strap from a barrel or something. It has nails about every 12 inches, I'd say.
That's just toy stuff.
I don't want to leave you with the impression that we bought a dump, because far from it. This place was very, very clean when we got here. There was a small pile of metal scrap which we actually used a lot of. There was that rotted out old trailer. But other than that, this place was in really good condition. If anything, we've made it a little bit worse because a lot of our projects end up with spare parts and things, and one of the jobs today is to organize and clean that up. We had a long talk before we got on property about whether or not we were going to have kind of a junk pile, which I like to call the Repurposed Resources Repository, RRR. That may be the first time I've ever said that. But it's actually really useful to have a bunch of stuff in a place as long as it's not an eyesore. So you can go, and we've cut pieces of metal bar and pieces of metal sheet and just things that we found here and used them for different purposes.
Bike.
One,
On 3.
2,
3.
wait. This is the spot where we're going to dig our geothermal greenhouse. Very small version of a geothermal greenhouse, just to see how well it works before we invest a lot of time and money into something like that. As all things, it comes down to weather out here. I'm slowly beginning to learn that when you work outdoors and when you live in an area where you're trying to grow food and build things, man, the weather just changes your plans all the time. We've been trying to get the equipment here to do this greenhouse dig and our septic dig at the same time, and it's been raining almost nonstop, and I've had to cancel 2 times. I have another appointment this week to get the equipment here and to get the septic inspector here on Wednesday. And the forecast says it's going to rain on Tuesday. The problem with rain here is our ground is really heavy clay, and when it rains it's hard to drive any vehicle around anywhere that's not a gravel road. And so I'm just nervous about getting the equipment out here, getting all the gravel out here that I need, and getting stuck. And if I get stuck with a piece of equipment that we've paid to rent by the hour, that's going to get expensive until we can get it pulled out. It's frustrating, the fact that I had to keep calling and canceling our appointments. It's really starting to wear on me. I came out the other day and it was just pouring rain, and I'm looking at the hillside. It's not going to clear up. I'm going to have to cancel again, and so I did. And honestly, that was one of the lowest days I've had here on the property, because I'm just sitting there. It's gloomy, it's cold, it's raining. I'm looking at the calendar. There's not that much time left to do this work, and it's got to be done before we can start moving forward on the house. One of the problems, the mistakes that I make often, is I try to group too many things together. For instance, we're renting equipment to dig the geothermal greenhouse, and the same day using that same equipment to do our septic dig, which is like our perk test for our septic system. And because those things are related, when one gets canceled, the other gets canceled, or when one thing can't happen, the other thing can't happen, and that just grows. It's just really frustrating. And so I just moped around all day and sat in the workshop and listened to the rain and thought about how everything we're doing is behind schedule and over cost, and it's just the nature of it. But you gotta press on. It's not really my nature to get stumped like that, to get just completely bummed out like that, but there's a million things to do, and when the next thing gets canceled or pushed back, everything gets pushed back. Anyway, I thought I'd spend a little time talking about my emotional states, up and down. I've had some really good days here in the last few weeks. I've had some really down days. But hopefully we're 2 days out from getting all the equipment here. I pray that we will have a couple hours of sunshine before and after, so we can get things dug and filled back in. It should be pretty exciting, so stay tuned. We could row a boat. Row, row, row your boat down the stream. Okay, we're gonna be turning because you're going much faster than me.
My arm's getting tired.